The uninvited guest, Julian Hayes, pulled his rental car to the side of the narrow coastal road and killed the engine. The main air was different from San Francisco cleaner, sharper, carrying the scent of salt and pine. After 3 weeks of headlines, social media firestorms, and lawyer meetings, the silence felt almost disorienting. He hadn't planned on Seabrook Harbor. His escape plan had been hastily arranged after the photos he'd taken exposed corruption at Horizon Media, and subsequently made him the target of a vicious counter-campaign by the powerful executives he'd implicated. All he'd wanted was somewhere quiet, somewhere he could disappear while his attorney handled the legal battle. Small cottage he'd rented sight unseen sat on a cliff overlooking the Atlantic. It was rustic and isolated, perfect for hiding from the world. Julian had spent the first 2 days sleeping and staring at the ocean. But by the third day, restlessness drove him toward town. That's when he noticed the commotion at the historic lighthouse. Cars lined the narrow lane. People in formal attire made their way up the path to the white structure perched on the rocky outcropping. White chairs had been arranged on the grassy area facing the ocean. Flowers adorned an improvised altar. Julian wasn't sure what made him park and follow the guests. Perhaps it was the photographer in him, drawn to capture moments of genuine emotion after months of corporate assignments. Or maybe it was simple loneliness, the desire to be around celebrating people after weeks of isolation and stress. "Friend of the bride or groom?" An elderly woman with a clipboard smiled at him near the entrance. "Groom," Julian replied with the confidence that came from years of talking his way into places he didn't belong. "Richard invited me, old college friend." The woman nodded and pointed him toward a seat in the back row. Julian slipped in just as the music began. A string quartet playing something classical that drifted on the sea breeze. He watched as groomsmen took their places, followed by bridesmaids in pale blue dresses that matched the sky. The guests stood as the bridal march began, and Julian rose with them, camera forgotten at his side. The bride appeared at the end of the aisle, her father beside her. Her face was partially obscured by a thin veil, but something about her silhouette, the way she moved, sent a jolt of recognition through Julian's body before his mind could process why. When she reached the halfway point, a gust of wind caught her veil, lifting it momentarily from her face. Julian's breath stopped. Olivia Bennett. The woman he'd loved and lost in Chicago 7 years ago, she hadn't seen him yet. Her eyes fixed forward on the waiting groom, a tall man with salt and pepper hair who looked at least 15 years her senior. Julian should leave. This was a mistake, an invasion of a private moment that had nothing to do with him, but his feet wouldn't move. As Olivia reached the altar and turned to face the guests, as her father gave her away, her gaze swept across the assembled crowd and landed on Julian. The recognition was immediate. Her eyes widened, her steps faltered, and for a heartbeat that seemed to stretch into eternity, the world around them disappeared. In that moment of shocked connection, Julian saw something in her expression that made his heart race. Not happiness, not anger, something far more complicated, something that looked remarkably like relief.v. 7 years of silence. The reception was held in the lighthouse keeper's house, now converted into an elegant venue with panoramic views of the churning Atlantic. Julian lingered at the edges of the celebration, nursing a flute of champagne while stealing glances at Olivia. She moved through the crowd with practiced grace, accepting congratulations and making introductions. The perfect bride except for the occasional moment when her smile would slip, and her eyes would search the room until they found him. The band played a slow jazz number as Julian retreated to the wooden deck overlooking the water. The sun was beginning its descent, painting the sky in watercolor hues of orange and pink. He should leave. He had no right to be here, to disrupt her day with his presence. "I always imagined you'd be the one waiting for me at the altar." Julian turned to find Olivia standing behind him, still in her wedding gown, but with the veil removed. Her chestnut hair was arranged in an intricate updo, small tendrils framing her face, that same face that had haunted his dreams for 7 years. "I never thought I'd see you again," he said, his voice barely audible above the sound of waves crashing against the rocks below. "Yet here you are, at my wedding." The accusation in her tone was unmistakable. "Why, Julian? I didn't know. It was your wedding. I'm staying nearby. Saw the ceremony, and he hesitated. I know it sounds impossible. What are you doing in Seabrook Harbor? Your life is in San Francisco now. I've seen your photographs in magazines. Julian leaned against the railing. You followed my career? I tried not to. A small, sad smile crossed her lips. But it's hard to ignore someone whose work keeps appearing on magazine covers. The memories flooded back their tiny apartment in Chicago, Olivia teaching elementary school while Julian worked nights at a bar, spending weekends taking photographs of everything and anything, dreaming of the day his work would be recognized. They had been young, passionate, certain their love could withstand any hardship, until that winter night 7 years ago. You never gave me a chance to explain, Julian said quietly. About Rebecca.
Olivia's fingers tightened around her champagne.
Glass, I saw enough. The texts, the photos. Her in our apartment when I came home early from my conference. She was my boss's daughter. She showed up unannounced to drop off the portfolio I'd submitted. Nothing happened between us. Then why did she have your messages saying you needed to see her? That you couldn't stop thinking about her? Julian closed his eyes, the familiar frustration returning. Those messages were about her father, about getting him to look at my work. I was desperate for that opportunity. You could have told me that. I tried. You wouldn't answer my calls. You disappeared, Olivia. Changed your number, moved out. By the time I tracked down your parents, they said you'd left Chicago altogether. The silence between them was heavy with 7 years of misunderstandings and missed opportunities. I was scared, Olivia finally admitted. Scared that what we had wasn't as real as I thought. Scared that I'd given up too much of myself. So I came back to Maine, started over. Julian gestured toward the reception inside and found Richard. Something flashed across Olivia's face, a fleeting expression of resignation that she quickly masked. Richard owns half the businesses in town. He's been very kind to me and my family. When my father's fishing boat needed repairs, Richard handled everything. When my mother got sick 2 years ago, he made sure she had the best specialists. She looked down at her diamond ring, twisting it absently. He asked me to dinner afterward. Things ... progressed from there. Do you love him? Question escaped before Julian could stop it. Olivia's gaze met his, unflinching. Why are you really here, Julian? What happened in San Francisco? Before he could answer, the doors to the deck opened, and a groomsman appeared. Liv, Richard's looking for you. It's almost time for the first dance. She nodded, her expression. Once again, becoming the perfect bride. Tell him I'll be right there, Thomas. As the door closed, Olivia turned back to Julian. Meet me at the lighthouse in an hour, the actual tower. There's a key under the 3rd stone to the left of the door. She touched his arm briefly. If you still want to explain after 7 years, I'll listen. She slipped back inside, leaving Julian alone with the dying light and the relentless waves. Below, wondering if he'd been given a second chance or simply the opportunity for a proper goodbye. Truths at twilight, the narrow spiral staircase of the lighthouse creaked under Julian's weight as he climbed toward the lantern room. Each step seemed to echo with questions. What was he doing here? What did he hope would come from this conversation? The scandal in San Francisco had taught him that. Truth was rarely simple and never without consequences. The lantern room at the top was small but offered a spectacular view of the coastline. The actual light mechanism had been modernized and automated years ago. But the original Fresnel lens remained as a historical artifact, catching and refracting the last rays of sunset in brilliant prismatic patterns across the room. Olivia was already there, standing by the windows. She had changed out of her wedding gown into a simple blue dress, her hair now falling loose around her shoulders. She looked more like the woman he remembered, the school teacher with paint-stained fingers, who used to laugh at his terrible jokes and dance with him in their kitchen at midnight. I wasn't sure you'd come, she said. I wasn't sure you meant it. Julian moved to stand beside her, looking out at the darkening horizon. Shouldn't you be having your first dance right about now? I told Richard I needed a moment alone. Wedding day nerves. She shrugged. He understands. Does he understand you, I mean? Olivia turned to face him fully. You don't get to question my choices, Julian. Not after 7 years of silence. Right. He ran a hand through his hair, a nervous habit he'd never outgrown. I'm sorry. This isn't how I imagined seeing you again. How did you imagine it? I didn't. Not really. After the first year, I tried to convince myself you were better off without me, but I needed to let you go. The lighthouse beam swept across, the water in a rhythmic pattern, illuminating their faces in brief, intense intervals. What happened in San Francisco, Julian? Is the real reason you're hiding in Seabrook Harbor? He leaned against the railing, gathering his thoughts. I was hired to photograph a corporate retreat for Horizon Media executives, team-building exercises, the usual corporate propaganda. During the event, I accidentally captured something I wasn't supposed to see. The CEO and several board members discussing how they were systematically stealing concepts from young creators, then burying them in legal paperwork. And you exposed them? Julian nodded. I couldn't just delete the photos and pretend I hadn't heard what I heard. So I published them, along with the audio I inadvertently recorded. The story went viral. That's admirable, Olivia said quietly. Maybe. But they came after me hard, claimed I doctored the audio, that I was trying to extort them. They dug into my past, found every mistake I've ever made, every person I might have offended. They're powerful people with deep pockets and no scruples. Understanding dawned in Olivia's eyes. So you're hiding. My lawyer calls it strategic retreat. The truth is coming out in court. But until then, I needed somewhere quiet to disappear. He gave a humorless laugh. I never expected to find you here. Silence fell between them, filled only by the distant sound of the reception music drifting up from below and the rhythmic sweep of the light. Your turn, Julian, finally said. The truth about Richard. Olivia moved away from the window, circling the massive lens at the center of the room. My father's fishing business was failing, and my mother's medical bills were piling up. Richa offered solutions when we were desperate. She paused. He's been nothing but kind, Julian. He loves me in his way. But do you love him? Care for? Him. I respect him. Love. ... Double quotes. She trailed off. Love is a luxury I couldn't afford. That's not the Olivia I knew. The woman who told me that love was the only thing worth risking everything for. That woman grew up. There was an edge to her voice now. She learned that passion doesn't pay medical bills, that dreams don't keep a roof over your head. So this marriage is what, a business arrangement? It's a choice I made with open eyes. Olivia's gaze was steady, challenging. Not everyone gets to chase their passion around the world, Julian. Some of us have responsibilities. The accusation stung because there was truth in it. While he'd been building his career, traveling from assignment to assignment, she'd been here, carrying the weight of her family's struggles. I would have helped. You, if I'd known, he said softly. Would you? As the man who couldn't even be bothered to find me after I left. I tried, Olivia. 4 months I tried. Your parents said you needed space. Your friends wouldn't tell me anything. Eventually I had to accept that you didn't want to be found. The lantern light swept across her face, revealing the glimmer of tears she was fighting to hold back. Maybe I was waiting for you to try harder, she whispered. Before Julian could respond, the door to the lantern room swung open. Richard stood in the doorway, his imposing figure silhouetted against the stairwell light. Olivia. His voice was controlled, but Julian could hear the tension underneath. Everyone's wondering where the bride has disappeared to. His gaze shifted to Julian, eyes narrowing with recognition. And who might you be? The choice, an old friend, Olivia said quickly, stepping away from Julian. From Chicago, Julian Hayes. Recognition flickered in Richard's eyes. The photographer? The one currently embroiled in that scandal with Horizon Media? Julian straightened, meeting the older man's gaze directly. That would be me. Richard's polite smile didn't reach his eyes. Quite a coincidence, you turning up at our wedding? I'm staying nearby. I had no idea Olivia would be here, yet here you are, alone with my bride on our wedding day. Richard's tone remained pleasant, but there was steel beneath it. He turned to Olivia. Darling, they're waiting for our first dance. Shouldn't disappoint our guests. Olivia glanced between the two men, conflict evident in her expression. Richard, could you give us just a few more minutes to say goodbye properly? Something dangerous flashed across Richard's face before his features smoothed into careful. Neutrality, of course. 5 minutes. He checked his watch pointedly. The band can only stay until 11. After Richard descended the spiral staircase, tension hung thick in the air of the lantern room. He seems... double quotes. Julian began. Don't. Olivia cut him off. Oh, you don't know him? I know he's watching the clock on your wedding day. While you're clearly upset, this is impossible. Olivia pressed her fingers to her temples.
8.
You can't just appear. After 7 years, and expect to understand my life now? Julian moved closer, close enough to catch the familiar scent of her perfume jasmine and vanilla. The same one she'd worn in Chicago. Then, help me understand. Is this really what you want? A marriage to a man you respect but don't love? What's the alternative? Run away with you? Her laugh was sharp, brittle. Back to San Francisco, where you're being hunted by corporate lawyers? Or should we just hit the road? No plan, no security, like we dreamed about when we were young. And stupid? We weren't stupid, Julian said quietly. Just hopeful. Olivia turned away, staring out at the now dark ocean. I made promises today. To Richard. To my family. To this entire town. I can't just walk away because my ex-boyfriend showed up with sad eyes and a complicated story. I'm not asking you to. She turned back, surprise evident on her face. Not here to wreck your life, Olivia. I just... Julian struggled to find the words. I need to know that you're choosing this. Really choosing it. Not settling for it because you think it's your only option. What difference does it make to you now? Because I never stopped loving you. The words hung between them, too honest. To take back even when I convinced myself I'd moved on. Even when I told myself you were happier without me. I never stopped. Tears spilled onto Olivia's cheeks. That's not fair. None of this is fair, but it's true. The lighthouse beam swept around again, illuminating the raw emotion on her face for a brief, stark moment. I need to go back down there, she said, wiping at her tears. They're all waiting. Olivia. Julian caught her hand as she moved toward the door. Whatever you decide, I'll respect it. But know that if you want something else, anything else, you have options. You always have options. Shh. She looked down at their joined hands, then slowly pulled away. Where are you staying? Seacliff Cottage. About 2 miles north of here. I need to think. I need time. Julian nodded. I'll be there until Sunday. Olivia took a deep breath, composing herself, visibly straightening her shoulders, wiping away the last traces of tears, becoming once again the picture-perfect bride. Goodbye, Julian, she said, and disappeared down the staircase. He remained in the lantern room long after she'd gone, watching the reception through the windows. He saw Olivia emerge from the lighthouse to applause, saw Richard take her hand. Possessively, saw them move to the center of the dance floor for their first dance. From this distance, they looked like the perfect couple, the successful businessman and his beautiful bride. Surrounded by friends and family, their future spreading. Before them secure and predetermined, but Julian had seen the truth in her eyes, had felt it in the trembling of her hand in his. The question was whether Olivia would acknowledge that truth to herself, and what she would do about it if she did. As midnight approached, Julian finally descended the lighthouse stairs and walked back to his rental car. Celebration continued. Behind him, but he didn't look back. Whatever happened next had to be Olivia's choice. He'd said what he needed to say. The rest was up to her. Morning tides, Julian woke to the sound of rain against the cottage windows. A nor'easter had rolled in overnight, bringing with it driving rain and wind that bent the coastal pines nearly horizontal. It suited his mood, gray, turbulent, uncertain. He made coffee and sat at the kitchen table, staring out at the angry sea. Last night, after leaving the wedding, he'd half expected Olivia to appear at his door, The rational part of him knew how unlikely that was, but some foolish hopeful part had stayed awake far too late, listening for the sound of tires on gravel. When his phone rang, he nearly knocked over his coffee reaching for it. His attorney's name flashed on the screen. Julian, good news. The whistleblower protections are holding. 3 former employees have come forward corroborating your evidence. Horizon is starting to crack their talking settlement. Relief washed over him. That's great, Caroline. Don't sound distracted. Everything okay in your hideaway? Julian stared out at the storm-tossed waves. It's complicated. Well, uncomplicate it and get back here. We need you present for depositions next week. After hanging up, Julian moved through the cottage, gathering his few belongings. There was no reason to stay now. The case was turning in his favor. His reputation might survive this after all. And Olivia had made her choice, or rather had chosen not to unmake the choice she'd already committed to. It was time to go. He was loading his suitcase into the trunk when headlights appeared through the rain, coming up the winding coastal road. Julian froze, watching as a small blue car pulled up beside his. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the driver's door opened and Olivia stepped out, immediately drenched by the downpour. She wasn't wearing her wedding dress. Instead, she was in jeans and a sweater, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She looked younger somehow, more like the woman he'd known in Chicago. "You're leaving," she said, noticing his packed car. Julian nodded. "My lawyer called. I'm needed back in San Francisco, I see." Olivia hugged herself against the chill. "I should have come sooner." "Why did you come at all?" He hadn't meant it to sound harsh, but the night of waiting had left him raw. "Because I couldn't go through with it." She looked up at him, rain streaming down her face like tears. "I tried. After you left, I danced with Richard. Cut the cake, did everything I was supposed to do. But when it came time to leave for our honeymoon, ... double quotes, she shook her head. "I couldn't." Julian's heart hammered in his chest. What did you tell him? The truth. That I was grateful for everything he'd done for my family, but that marrying him for those reasons would be wrong for both of us. Her voice broke slightly. He was angry, hurt. He said some things about you, about me, about obligations and ingratitude. Olivia, I never meant this isn't about you, Julian. Not entirely. She stepped closer, rain soaking through her clothes. It's about me finally being honest with myself, about what I want, what I need. And what is that? A second chance. Not just with you, with myself, with the woman I used to be before I started making compromises. She reached for his hand. I don't expect us to pick up where we left off 7 years ago. Too much has happened, but maybe we could start something new, something honest. Julian looked at Hurst ending in the rain. Having left behind security and certainty for this moment of truth between them, he thought about San Francisco, about the legal battles still ahead, about how complicated everything was about to become. And then he thought about how simple this one thing could be. He pulled her to him, not caring about the rain or the cold, or the uncertain future. Her lips found his, and in that kiss was 7 years of longing, of regret, of possibility. When they finally broke apart, Julian rested his forehead against hers. What about your family? Your life here? My father's boat is fixed. My mother's. Health is stable. They'll understand eventually. She smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. As for my life here, I think it's time for a change of scenery. Julian glanced at his packed car, then back at Olivia. I'm heading back to San Francisco. It's going to be complicated. Depositions, possibly a trial. I've always wanted to see the Bay Area, she said simply. And I hear they need good teachers. Everywhere. The rain continued to fall around them, but neither moved to seek shelter. This moment, perfect, unexpected, real, felt too important to interrupt. We should probably talk about everything, Julian said. 7 years is a lot of ground to cover. Olivia nodded. We have time. Maybe we could start with breakfast. I know a place in town that makes incredible blueberry pancakes. Won't people talk? The bride who ran away, having breakfast with a stranger the morning after her wedding. She laughed, and the sound was like coming home after a long journey. Let them talk. I'm done living my life according to other people's expectations. Julian opened the passenger door of his car. Pancakes sound perfect. And after that, Olivia slid into the seat, looking up at him with eyes full of possibility. After that, we figure it out together. One day at a time. As Julian walked around to the driver's side, he felt lighter than he had in years. Storm still raged. The future was still uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, he wasn't facing it alone. And that made all the difference.